question. Name the remake of the groundbreaking...
Halloween, Texas Chainsaw, Dawn of the Dead, The Hilltop Heights, Amityville Horror, Black Christmas, House of Wax, Pop Night, My Bloody Valentine. It's one of those, right?
None of the above.
Scream 4 came out in the year 2011 and was directed by Wes Craven. This would be the final film that Wes Craven would direct before he passed away in 2015. The film was written by Kevin Williamson, who had of course written Scream and Scream 2, and he wrote a script for Scream 3, but then when a real-life horrific event happened outside of the movies, well, that made the studio want to go in a completely different direction with Scream 3, so they scrapped his script, they hired a new writer, and they put distance between themselves and teenagers and high school killings. And that would, of course, cap off that original trilogy of films, and then the franchise didn't do anything for 11 years. So when we get to Scream 4, the horror genre had started to change. So with the horror genre starting to change, and the rules of the horror genre starting to change, this film would serve as a bit of a continuation from the previous trilogy, while also becoming a bit of a remake within the franchise itself. Essentially, they tried to capture the magic of the previous films while introducing new elements. Did it all work? Well, let's do the review for Scream 4.
Here we go.
That is one big pile of shit.
No, I shot him. Bullets in the fall killed him.
So Scream 4 opens up on a house in Woodsboro with two girls who are home alone when they get attacked by a Ghostface killer. And just as one of the girls might be getting away, she opens the door and a second Ghostface killer is there at the door to kill her, showing us two Ghostfaces at the beginning of a Scream film for the very first time. Well, that is until the Scream pauses and it turns out that you're watching a clip from Stab 7, because while the Scream movies might have halted in our own personal universe, in the Scream universe, the Stab movies have been going strong. We're then introduced to two new girls who are watching Stab 7, who are having a conversation about horror movies. That is until one of them decides to stab the other one in the stomach. Well, that's where that scene ends as well, because that is a movie within a movie in the Stab franchise, and we are now actually in the Scream universe with two girls that are home alone watching Stab, and that's when our real Ghostface killer shows up and brutally murders them, and so we have our opening to Scream 4. And that scene would lead into catching up with characters from the previous trilogy. The first character would be the new sheriff of Woodsboro, who's not new to us because it's Sheriff Dewey. He's now the sheriff of Woodsboro, investigating this new Ghostface kill. Courtney Cox also returns in this film as Gal Weathers, but she's no longer a news reporter. She now writes books from home, but she's currently struggling with writer's block, so when she hears that there's a new Ghostface killing, well, that gets her news reporter senses stirring, and she has to get to the crime scene, and she has to try and help Sheriff Dewey figure out who these new Ghostface killers are. And that brings us to Sidney Prescott, once again played by Neve Campbell, who has written a book about Woodsboro and the Ghostface killings, and she is on a book tour, and she's in Woodsboro for the signing of this book when the first Ghostface killings happen, and that's what brings together Dewey and Gale and Sidney to find out who the new Ghostface killer is. And that's of course the continuation characters from the first trilogy of films, and where they're at the start of Scream 4. Now we have to talk about the new cast of characters, the new group of high schoolers that seem to be targeted by this Ghostface killer, a killer that's obsessed with making their lives the remake of the original Scream film. The first high schooler to talk about is Jill Roberts, played by Emma Roberts, and Jill is Sidney Prescott's niece. Is that why she's being targeted by this Ghostface killer? And in her friend group, we have Kirby Reed, played by Hayden Panettiere. This is her best friend, and that brings us to the last two members of this new high school group. And one is named Charlie Walker, played by Rory Culkin. The other one's name is Robbie Mercer, played by Eric Knudsen, and these two are absolute movie nerds. They have clubs where they talk about movies all the time, and even at one point in the movie they're able to get Sidney Prescott to come to their club because of course they all love horror movies in this club and they all love the Stab franchise, so getting her there is like having movie royalty coming into their room, so they're very excited to have Sidney one day. These two love movies to a weird degree, like they want to make movies really bad. Robbie always walks around with a camera like attached to his head, so he's constantly recording everyone, which of course makes you the viewer a little bit suspicious of both Charlie Shirley and Robbie, since both of them are obsessed with horror movies, both of them are obsessed with the Stab franchise. They put Sidney on such a high pedestal. It makes you wonder why these two are so obsessed. Could they potentially be our new Ghostface killers? And once the Ghostface killer targets both the continuation characters from the previous trilogy and this new group of high schoolers, well, they all have to come together and try and figure out who is this new Ghostface killer. Could it be one of the people in their group? Could it be an outside character, maybe somebody like Jill's boyfriend who goes in and out of Jill's window just like Billy Loomis used to do? He's very suspicious as well. So I guess the point I'm making here is that this movie is yet again another whodunit. Who could be the new Ghostface killer? And that is the best synopsis that I can give you for Scream 4. If that sounds like a fun time, well, then you should definitely check this movie out. Maybe you've never seen this film. Maybe you saw the original trilogy of movies. Maybe you're a little younger, so you've seen Scream 5 and 6 in theaters, but you haven't seen Part 4 yet. If you haven't watched this movie, I highly recommend that you check it out, especially if you enjoy the whodunit aspect of the Scream films. I think this one really delivers. With that said, I am going to get into my positives and my negatives for Scream 4 here in a second, but before I do that, if this is the first time you found my channel, well, I would love for you guys to hit that subscribe button, check out all the different content that I have, whether you like movie reviews, Blu-ray talk, or even ranked list videos. I've got a little bit of everything on my channel, and I'd love for you guys to check it out. All right, let's get into my positives and my negatives for Scream 4.
You should have seen the look on your face.
My first positive for this movie is the way that they're able to blend this continuation cast from the original trilogy, the three survivors from those films, both Gail, Sidney, and Dewey, and they're able to blend those in with the new high school characters. It definitely helps that there's a bit of a bridge between these two, since Jill is Sidney's niece, since Jill's mother was Sidney's mother's sister, so like there is a definite connection between these two groups, but that helps a lot. That puts the characters from the continuation trilogy with these new high school characters, and it blends them in really well. It's never weird to see one of these adults hanging out with one of these high schoolers because, again, there is that connection of family.
Family, 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 family.
Between Sidney and Jill that helps blend those groups. Speaking of the old group and new group, that brings me into my next positive, which is the new rules for this film, which are told to us from the character of Robbie. Robbie is essentially this movie's version of Randy from the previous films, although he doesn't hold a candle to Randy, in my opinion. He's still a fun character, though. I did enjoy him. He explains that this is a new film. This is a new remake of sorts. It's not necessarily a remake in that we're getting rid of the entire cast, but that is the plan of this Ghostface killer. This Ghostface killer wants a remake of the Scream franchise. It wants a whole new cast of characters. That's why we have these high school characters. But since you have these continuation characters from the previous trilogy, well, that's why the Ghostface killer wants to kill all of them, because they want to move forward with a new Ghostface killer and a new film series in the killer's mind. Robbie also has a great death scene in this movie. I'm spoiling it here, but the movie's been out since 2011. At one point, Ghostface is coming after him, and he tells him, hey, the rules have changed. I should be able to live because I'm gay. And this Ghostface does not care at all, just stabs him to death. So it's a really great death scene. My next positive for this movie is the technology that's being used either by characters in this film or even by the Ghostface killers in this film, because by 2011, handheld cameras were a thing. People running around with their phones taking videos of things, or people having little cameras that they would wear. All of that was more prevalent in society, and so this new Ghostface killer wants to be the one filming the actual murders. This Ghostface killer is obsessed with the murders from the past. They're obsessed with the Stab movies, and they want the next movie to be real. They want the next movie to be something that they filmed. And at one point, Sidney walks outside the house and looks at the wind chime and notices that someone has tied a little tiny camera to that wind chime, filming this new movie for the Ghostface killers. And I like that introduction of real life tech and how tech has moved from where it started in 1996 with the first Scream film all the way to 2011. As technology gets updated, the Scream franchise gets updated with it, just like it shifts with the horror genre, and they show you that in this film, and I really enjoyed that. Another moment I want to mention real quick before moving on to my next positive is when Gail Weathers is setting up all of these different cameras at the local Stabathon, and Stabathon is an event where they show all 7 Stab movies to a bunch of high schoolers and young adults who are drinking and having a fun time, but she thinks that the Ghostface killer is going to be there, so she sets up all of these cameras, and that's again just using more technology. But of course, when she gets back to her car to look at these cameras, she she notices someone is blacking all of them out, to the point where she gets to the last camera and they turn the camera and it's the Ghostface killer. And I really enjoy that in this movie. It's one of my favorite scenes in this film, and it's one of my favorite scenes in the whole franchise. It's just a really creepy way to use new technology, but to blend it with a good scare. My next positive involves the Ghostface killers, both their motivation and the reveal of the killers. So if you have not seen this movie yet, spoilers ahead. But what I really like about the reveal of these killers is that it makes complete sense as to why these killers specifically wanted to film what they were doing. One of the obsessed with movies guys in the friend group, Charlie Walker, is one of the Ghostface killers, so it makes sense why he's recording everything, why he's going around trying to get footage while killing all of these different people in the film. And the other Ghostface killer is Jill Roberts. Having somebody from Sydney's bloodline is something we've seen before. Of course, we saw her brother come out of nowhere in the third film, and he was the Ghostface killer. So in this film, having Jill be the Ghostface killer was a fun misdirect, because we didn't think they were going to do it again. Or at least I didn't think they were going to do family is the problem yet again. But they did. Jill is the killer in this film. She's obsessed with not just making the movie, but she wants to be the star of the movie. So again, it's the reason for this Ghostface killer is why I love this reveal, because she's sick in her eyes of always seeing Sydney as the star of these stab movies. Oh, Sydney Prescott, she's the girl that lived. Well, Jill wants to turn to be the one that lived, and Jill will do anything, including become the Ghostface killer herself, devise this plan to kill her own friends, to kill all of those continuation characters. She'll do this so that she can become the star. She leaves Gail alive on purpose in this movie so that her and Gail can write a book together, because she thinks she's going to get away with it, and she almost does. And this leads to a little bit of a controversial statement I'm going to make, but I almost wish she had gotten away with it. I'm very curious what they would have done with a Scream 5 had Jill Roberts survived. And I'm not necessarily saying that her plan to kill Sydney had gone through. I'm not saying cut Sydney from the franchise. I'm just saying, had Jill survived, if they had ended it with Jill being taken away on a stretcher and Sydney being taken away on a stretcher, maybe in a to be continued moment, that would have been pretty awesome. I don't know where they would have gone with part 5 at that point, so maybe it wouldn't have been great in the long run, but in that moment, it would have been awesome, because then we get over to the hospital scene where it's Jill versus Sydney and Dewey's involved, and they're trying to figure out how to stop this Ghostface killer, and it does go on a little long. But again, the reveal of the Ghostface, all of that works for me. That'll do it for my positives. Now we're going to get over to my negatives. And since we were just talking about it, I guess I'll continue on to say that one of my negatives for this film is that it does go on a little too long, in my opinion. And again, this is me as a fan just wishing they had done things a little differently. I do wish they had ended things with Jill and Sydney on the floor, or Jill and Sydney being loaded up into 2 different ambulances, maybe finding out that Sydney was still alive, doing a to be continued there, something like that. But instead, the movie goes on to the hospital, where you then have to watch as Sydney and Jill face off once again, because Jill wants to be in the spotlight. She wants to be the one that survived no matter what. And I do feel like it goes on a little too much. I wish they had cut that off. So that's my first negative. But again, I don't know where the film would have gone after that. I don't know how they would have continued on with a Scream 5, or if Wes Craven would have even been able to do a Scream 5 at that point. So ultimately, this is a negative from the fan side of me, just wishing they had done things a little differently. My next negative for this movie is the relationship between both Dewey and Gail. I wasn't buying any of their relationship throughout this movie. I thought the two of them had zero chemistry with each other, and I felt like these two just didn't feel like a married couple. They didn't feel like two people that really loved each other. I felt that more in Scream 5, and more on that when we get to that review, but in Scream 4, I just didn't feel the connection between the two of them. They always had a will they, won't they going from the first movie to the second movie. In the third movie, Dewey proposes at the end, and so you're like, okay, they lived happily ever after. And then you get to Scream 4, and I just didn't feel like they were in a marriage together. I didn't feel like these characters were connected with each other. Maybe that's because of real life drama, getting a divorce in real life, not being able to coexist with each other in real life, and so when they get on screen together, they just didn't have it in 2011. The next negative is just more of an irritation to me, and that's that they don't play the song Red Right Hand in this movie at all. This is the only Scream film that doesn't have the song Red Right Hand, and it always bothers me when I watch this movie. There are several moments where it would have worked really well, even if you played it for just a couple of seconds like they do in Scream 5. Just something thrown at you, but instead, you don't get it at all in this film, and that's always irritated me. That'll bring me to my final negative, and this negative is something that I'm sure has been brought up in every Scream 4 review in the past, and this is something that, while I'm not going to break any new ground by saying this, it did bother me while I was watching, so I wanted to put in my negatives, and that is the glossy look look that this film has throughout every frame of this movie. Now, what's been explained away to me online is that they did that on purpose because that's how films were looking in the early 2010s. They had that glossy digital look to them, and so this was a creative choice by Wes Craven to make it look like that. Now, Wes Craven is dead, so I don't know if that's absolutely accurate, but that glossy digital look that this film has really makes this film stand out from those original 3 Scream films, especially if you watch them like I've been doing, watching them back to back to back to back, and you get to part 4 and you're like, what is that digital glossy look? Now, I have heard that this was transferred to 4K recently on digital, and you can actually buy a 4K version of this where they've cleaned up that digital look, they've cleaned up that glossiness, and it now looks a lot cleaner and it looks a lot like those original movies. If that's the case, I would love to see that. I just already own a copy of this on Blu-ray and I didn't want to go ahead and pay for a digital download, although I did hear that they're upgrading it to a 4K, which is something we've never gotten with Scream 4, and I would love to see that, especially if we're going to get rid of that digital glossy look. Something that's always bothered me about the Scream films, and it's not the Scream films' fault, is that they have Steelbook 4K releases for 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. We do not have a Steelbook release for part 4. Best Buy was churning those out, and the year that they decided we're not going to do movies anymore was the year we should have gotten Scream 4 as a 4K upgrade, but we never got that. So I've talked about it on my channel before, but my collection looks weird because it's Steelbook, 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 Blu-ray, Steelbook, and it's just annoying. I want that 4K upgrade, but also if it does delete that digital glossiness, then I'll remove this negative. But as always, guys, those are just my opinions because that's my review for Scream 4. Have you guys had a chance to see this film yet? If you have, let me know in that comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, where we agree, where we disagree. And finally, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my Scream 4 review. I am loving watching all of these movies and doing reviews for them. It's so fun to go through my favorite slasher franchise and actually get to talk about it on camera. And of course, all of these reviews are leading up to the release of Scream 7 that I absolutely can't wait for, where I will be watching and reviewing that movie and then giving you guys a full ranked list of the entire Scream franchise from worst to best. But in the meantime, if you want to check out any of the other content on my channel, well, I've got all of my Scream movie reviews right there, and I've got all of my Halloween movie reviews right there.